I really liked this paragraph from your first chapter, I think. People who are ignorant of history can be persuaded of just about anything. Power hungry politicians seeking to impose their ideology on society can easily turn ill informed citizens into compliant subjects who obey the state unthinkingly and unconditionally. Ignorance of history, a goal that is deliberately pursued by much of today's public education systems, makes it more likely that Canadians will tolerate being governed by a repressive regime. I thought this was super important because I've been thinking about this a lot for many years now. I feel like I sort of, missed these history lessons in school, and I can only imagine that it would be worse now. When COVID first came along and politicians first started to say things like 2 weeks to flatten the curve, I believed them and I didn't see any red flags. And I actually was like, why is everybody being so whiny about this? It's just 2 weeks. And then eventually I sort of caught on to what was going on, mainly by listening to and reading the views of other people who were pointing out, this is not really what's going on. It's not just 2 weeks, and these things are dangerous. And if you let go of your rights, it's hard, if not possible, to win them back. I mean, do you think that's sort of the primary problem here and the primary danger, that people don't know the history, so they can't sort of see the signs of totalitarianism coming until it's too late?
Well, there is a serious danger of that. And the first quarter of the book, I'll hold it up for people that are not. I mean, if you're listening by podcast, you can't see it, but if you're watching the video, so the first quarter of the book, I go through the corruption of the legal profession in Germany in the 1930s, and you had a situation there where you would think that a human rights violator like Hitler, who, long before we had the mass killing of millions of people in the 1940s, prior to that, we had first the taking away of all the basic human rights and freedoms, civil liberties of the German citizens. So freedom of speech, gone. Freedom of conscience and religion, lots of restrictions placed on that. Freedom of association, largely gone. Your right to create and form a new political party and vote for it, gone. Habeas corpus, which is the right to not be locked up indefinitely on trumped up charges, and a right to appear before a judge who's going to say, yes, you need to stay in jail pending trial, or no, you're allowed out of jail pending trial. So habeas corpus, the right to vote in elections, freedoms of speech, religion, conscience, association, privacy, the right to not have your phone tapped or to have your mail read by the state, and on and on and on. So all these rights and freedoms were taken away in the 30s. With a substantial amount of support. I mean, that's the other thing that's interesting historically is Canadians tend to assume, and I think most Americans and Europeans, we assume that everybody's in favor of these rights and freedoms. And the moment the politicians start taking them away, there's going to be this outcry and people are going to march in the streets to protect the rights and freedoms. And like, this was not the case in Germany. There were a lot of people, they didn't appreciate democracy. They felt that it brought them poverty and unemployment and hyperinflation and the humiliation of needing to comply with the Treaty of Versailles that was imposed on Germany after it lost the First World War. So there's a lot of people, they voted for Hitler's party, the National Socialists. They were the largest party in Germany. So this wasn't like this, tiny band of evil people. I mean, I think they were evil people, but it wasn't this tiny little group that pulled the wool over the eyes of the people and took away their rights and freedoms, and people just, were upset about losing their rights and freedoms. Like, no, they voted for the Nazis and the communists, who between the two of them, by 1932, most Germans were voting for parties that wanted to destroy democracy. The communists and the National Socialists or Nazis, they both said, we want to get rid of democracy. We want to get rid of rights and freedoms. And you had half of the electorate was voting for that. So what's the lesson? Well, okay, so what we had in Canada under the COVID regime obviously was not genocide. It was not mass murder. It was not the National Socialist regime in the 1940s, but it was comparable to what we saw in Mussolini's Italy, Germany, and other countries. You saw a lot of popular support for fascist movements and fascist regimes that very openly said, we will take away your rights and freedoms. And a lot of people were like, yeah, good, I'm voting for that. So this is something that most people, I think, in Canada are just have zero understanding of the history and how rights and freedoms are taken away with a pretext, and it's based on fear and fear-mongering.